It's a city better known for oil and granite, but Aberdeen is now leading the conversation on bronze too. Benin Bronzes, to be exact. The university, a 525-year-old institution, values tradition. But it's rethinking what its museum collection should look like for the future, becoming the first in the UK to decide it will return its Benin Bronze sculpture to Nigeria. A decision that might perhaps shame other museums.
The critical one here was about the circumstances of its history. How was it acquired in the first place? So in 1897, when Benin City was sacked, and the immorality of that, the destructiveness of that, was clearly an important factor in our discussions. The overwhelming one was that it was stolen, it was looted, therefore in essence it was stolen property that should not be the property of the university.
The sculpture depicts an oba, or a king. It was part of a collection of thousands of objects brought back to the UK after being looted from Benin City in 1897. These were sacred items taken in a brutal, bloody and violent manner by British forces overthrowing the Oba of Benin City. Here's a young David Attenborough explaining.
The victors posed for their photographs in the palace courtyards. Stacked behind them, objects from the palace shrines that they were to bring back to Britain.
The sculpture in Aberdeen was bought for £750 from a private collector at an auction in 1957. That these objects were taken in an act of colonial plunder is fact, but a fierce debate remains about what that means for museums.
There must be other items in your collection that were acquired through looting or violence. Are you considering those too?
There probably are. I mean, it's a very large collection. We've got to look really carefully at all the different objects, all their histories, to work out which ones are appropriate and which ones are not.
Are you worried about being seen as radical by the government?
I don't think I think this is about truth. I mean, we're doing it because it's the right thing to do. I mean, and that really is the end of the decision.
In Nigeria, a new Edo Museum of West African art is planned. They hope to recover Benin Bronzes around the world and display them here.
Do you hope this is going to be the beginning of something?
This is probably a watershed moment. I think there's a huge amount of excitement. I think there's still a significant amount of skepticism about whether or not these objects will actually return. We are really focused on making sure that objects that are returned have a home for them to be displayed to Nigerians and to the world. And I think in the ideal world, some of those objects would remain ambassadors abroad, but obviously under different circumstances. So rather than them being taken, them being allowed to be displayed abroad.
I used to live on the wall of a palace until I was torn off in malice.
The British Museum holds 900 Benin Bronzes, but only around 100 are on display. And while Aberdeen and some German museums are planning returns, the British Museum is not. They told us they acknowledge the devastation and plunder wreaked upon Benin City and that they're working in partnership with Nigerian organisations. There are Benin Bronzes scattered in museums around the world, in the US, Russia, Europe and of course the UK. These are just some of the British institutions who've confirmed they hold such artworks. But experts believe the list is much longer. Chances are there is a Benin Bronze in a gallery near you. At the Pitt Rivers Museum in Oxford, a curator is rethinking how museums which began as colonial institutions need to change. Here, the Benin collection includes an ivory tusk, burnt from fires in the raid in 1897. Dan Hicks has been busting myths about the history, and he believes returns have to be a part of making amends.
Racism is not something that just emerges from nowhere. It's something that has a history, and that history is in part a history of empire. Empire is here in physical form.
What about those who say this is just a part of the push and pull of history, looting happens in all wars?
Of course, objects have always moved from A to B. Looting almost certainly has existed in all societies, but in the late 19th century, it turned into something very distinctive. It turned into a wider dispossession of African traditional religion, of African sovereignty, and of African culture. So exactly as we've accepted for Nazi loot, in the very different historical circumstances of empire, it's equally important for us to be open to returns in the case of loot.
So, as Britain grapples with racism in its present, perhaps the answer partly lies in how we display the imperial past.